Hello and welcome to our video today. I am Dr. Lauren Rooney and I'm a clinical psychologist who works in the NHS and in private practice. Today we're going to be talking about diagnosis but also formulation. So in psychology we often tend to not use a diagnosis, we won't give a label. Diagnosis has pros and cons. So positively, if you have a diagnosis of a mental health problem, you know what that label is, and in a way that's a shorthand. So you could tell your GP, your consultant, anybody, oh, I have depression, I have anxiety, and they'll understand that that's a constellation of a certain number of symptoms. So for example, if you had depression, you would feel low, you might have issues with eating, you might have issues with sleeping. There's a general kind of sense of there being a load of individual symptoms that make up that diagnosis. So there are pros to it and it can be helpful. It means that you can then go away and research it, you can find excellent documents on the Mind website and you can send them to friends and family to explain what's going on for you, and you can look into this diagnosis, see what medications and treatments there are. I'm not against diagnosis, however, in my experience diagnoses are often a bit too simplistic. So I meet lots and lots of people and they'll tell me I have a diagnosis of anxiety, however I'm also having panics and I'm also feeling low sometimes and I'm also feeling a bit anxious about going outside sometimes. Am I going crazy? Because they not only have this one diagnosis, but they have other symptoms. And because we are used to a diagnosis meaning just one cluster of symptoms, people start to panic that things are going really wrong. So I prefer what we call a formulation. A formulation is looking at your individual cluster of symptoms. So looking at what you're experiencing and making sense of it for you. It's really individual, and it helps us to explain why there's so much variance in what you're feeling. So for example, if you are feeling anxious or depressed, some people would overeat, but some people would undereat, and that wouldn't be captured in a diagnostic label. Similarly, if you're experiencing anxiety, you might be experiencing anxiety about lots of different things. And you also might be feeling pretty rubbish and pretty sad and low and depressed because you've just been worn down by how tired you are from the anxiety. Doesn't mean you have anxiety and depression. It means that you have a cluster of symptoms that you have and it's bringing you down. So what we'll be thinking about today is how to create your own formulation so that you know what's going on and that we can work out how to break this cycle and try and break this formulation. So I've got lots of paper here in front of me and I recommend that you go and get some paper yourself. I've got a thick marker pen just so that you can see what I'm writing on the camera, but a normal biro pen is absolutely fine. So when you've got your paper, turn it up this way, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw a rough triangle. So at the top point of our triangle we're going to have thoughts. Then at one corner we're going to have feelings. And then the other corner we're going to have behaviour. So here we go. Here's my basic formulation triangle. So the first thing we think about is the thoughts. So often we don't notice that we're having a bad time until we have all the feelings. But what we know through research is that every single feeling we have is due to a thought. But often these thoughts are so automatic that we don't even realise that we're having them. They just pop into our brain and pop out again. And before we know it, we're feeling really rubbish because these thoughts have been unconsciously bothering us. So if you take a moment to think about a time where you felt pretty rubbish. It doesn't have to be the worst time ever, and it's really good if it's a recent example, so maybe in the last week. So you might need to close your eyes and pause and have a think, or you might need to go over diaries, or just remind yourself about kind of things you took photos of, because that can often remind you of where you were and what was going on. When you're there, have a think about what was going through your mind. What thoughts were you having? So often people will say things like, I was thinking about money and it made me feel really worried. So in that thoughts you'd go, thinking about money. You might put in the thoughts, I was thinking about all the jobs I have to do and that made me feel really overwhelmed. So in the top we've got thinking about all the jobs. It's just the thought, not the emotion, just the thought label. So if I take an example of going to go and see my in-laws this weekend, I'll use that as my example, but you use your own example. Under thoughts, I would write, I was thinking about the things that I packed, so maybe my clothes, and if I pack the right clothes, am I going to get caught out? Am I going to go to the wrong event wearing the wrong thing and get judged? So kind of all the what ifs, so I'll write what ifs. And maybe I might be thinking and worrying about how you're going to get on this weekend. So I'm thinking about how we'll get on. And for me also, thinking about COVID, the rules are changing all the time. At the time of me talking to you, today it's gone down from 30 people in a gathering to 6 people in a gathering. So for me, there were thoughts around how many people are going to be there? How am I going to manage social distancing? So I'm going to do thinking about COVID. So that's the thoughts. Take your time, write them down, put as many thoughts as you want in there. Then we move on to feelings. So if for you thoughts have been challenging to come up with, and they might be because, as I say, they're unconscious, feelings might be the easier thing to come to. So have a think about where you were, what was going on, and what feelings you had. And every emotion we feel in our body. So it might be a tightness in your chest, which tells you that you're feeling a bit panicky. It might be kind of a low feeling in your tummy that makes you feel, actually, I was a bit disappointed. It might be kind of your head's racing, all those fight or flight symptoms that tell you you're anxious. So for me, thinking about that weekend with my family, I had anxiety. And I was feeling quite worried. And I think if I was thinking about other feelings, maybe physical sensations I was having, I was feeling a bit like my heart was racing. So I'll put that as there as well, because that's a feeling, whatever your body's going through. So heart racing. And what else was I feeling? I guess I was probably feeling a little bit headachy, and that doesn't really help my mood. So I'll put headaches. Because who knows if those headaches were due to anxiety, or maybe they were first, but they made me feel more anxious. So it's important to put in there. Now, it's always really important to think to yourself, is this a thought or is this a feeling? And it's hard to distinguish, and I can put some resources in the comments on this so you can find out a sheet for how to do it. But basically, thoughts don't have that emotional, physical connection, whereas feelings do have that physical connection. So I have lots of people who say to me, oh, I feel really silly. And because we're saying I feel silly, we think it's a feeling, but silly isn't a feeling. Silly is a thought. I think that I'm being silly. And that thinking, that thought, makes us feel embarrassed, or it makes us feel shy, or it makes us feel awkward, makes us feel uncomfortable. Those are the emotions, those are the feelings. The thought is, I feel silly, even though I'm saying feel. So just making sure you're teasing it apart. I feel stupid. That's not a feeling. I don't feel stupid in my body. I think I'm stupid. And in my body, I feel embarrassed. I feel ashamed. I feel anxious. So just seeing if you can tease apart what those things are. But again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, because this is your formulation. You don't need to show this to anyone. No one's going to test you on this. This is just to be helpful for you. If you're having difficulties with sleep, stick that in kind of what's going on for you. So it might be a worry, thinking I'm not going to sleep tonight, which ends up making me feel anxious. It makes my head race and my thoughts race. So those are my feelings. Then our third corner is our behaviour. So that's what we're doing to cope with how we feel. So say, for example, if I had low mood and I was feeling really sad and really overwhelmed, and note that I'm not saying if I had depression, then I might go to bed. And I might go to bed for ages, because that would make me potentially feel better. So I might write down there, go to bed, pull the covers over my head, not talk to anyone. I might have switch off the phone and don't talk to my friends. I might have cancel appointments. So in this thoughts and feelings thing, my behaviour might have been to moan to my husband. Moan to husband. I could have potentially maybe write in here that I would have cancelled that weekend. Or even, particularly if you have anxiety, we act in certain ways because we're anxious that kind of make our fears come true. So for example, if you have social anxiety, you might go to a party or go to a gathering, and rather than kind of talk to people, you might stand in the corner quietly. And that's okay, that's fine. But if you have the assumption that no one wants to talk to me and that's why I feel anxious, standing in a corner looking at the floor, it's probably not going to make you the most approachable. So then people won't approach you, and that belief comes true in a way. Accidentally, we make our belief come true. And so with my behaviour, maybe what I could have done is when I saw my in-laws, I might have just sat and played on my phone all the time, or I might have kind of ignored them and not joined in the conversation. And in return, they might have then started ignoring me, or Lauren doesn't care, Lauren doesn't want to talk to me. And so then I would have felt even more isolated and more anxious and more awkward. So I could have play on phone, and I could have ignore everyone. So this is the worst case scenario. This is what the behaviour that I want to do. Maybe if I'm stuck in a cycle, it's the behaviour I am doing. So then we look at this, what we've got, and we think about, when I'm thinking these thoughts, is it making my feelings worse? Yes. For me, when I'm thinking about all the what ifs, thinking about how we're going to get on, thinking about COVID, it's making me more worried. So I'm going to draw an arrow from thoughts to feelings. And when I'm feeling anxious, worried, my heart's racing and I feel headachy, I'm more likely to moan to my husband, and I'm more likely to play on my phone and ignore everyone and retreat and avoid, because it all feels too much, because it's overwhelming and I'm already overwhelmed. I haven't got the space for this in my mind. So yes, that arrow goes from feelings to behaviour. However, when I behave this way, when I moan to my husband, when I avoid people, I end up having more what ifs. I might end up getting an argument with my husband, and that'll make me feel even worse. I might end up never proving that it's okay if I pack the wrong clothes, that my mother-in-law won't reject me and shout at me and tell me I'm silly, and that she won't be horrible, or whatever it is I think. And I never work out that actually my mother-in-law's quite nice, and she probably loves me, and she really, really won't mind if I'm struggling and if I tell her I'm really worrying about all these things. But because I'm not doing that in this fictional scenario, then I end up feeling more worried, I end up feeling more rejected, and then the next time I have to see my mother-in-law, it's going to feel even worse. I've gotten into a vicious cycle by accident. Once we know our formulation, then keep updating it. So every time you have a difficult time, every time you look at your wrap plan from our last one, our wellbeing plan, stick it in here. Really, really colour this in. And then when we look at it, we can think about how to break this cycle. So if we're thinking about breaking this cycle, feelings, these all make sense because of what I'm thinking. I can't change how I feel when I'm thinking all these thoughts. I can't just go, horrible thought, horrible thought, horrible thought, and calm. So what I have to do is try and break the cycle at thoughts. So I've drawn a big line through my arrow. I'm breaking my cycle here. Another way I can break my cycle is by what I do. A big line here. So then, if you've got another colour of pen, you can write down all your ideas around that break for how you could break that cycle. So for example, I'm thinking about all the what ifs, I'm thinking about how we'll get on, things are churning over and over and over in my head, and that's making me feel worse. So what can I do? I could distract myself. So I could do the things that make me feel better, like my knitting, like chatting to someone, like playing a game on my phone while I'm on my own, like excusing myself to have a nap if I do feel overwhelmed, but only a 20-minute nap, not retreating forever. I could think about doing some mindfulness. And there's loads of great videos on our group already from all the other professionals about mindfulness. Really check them out. Mindfulness is an excellent skill, but it takes ages to learn, so give it a go. What else could I do? I could reach out to somebody, so I could talk to someone. Or I could talk to myself with compassion. I could just be really kind and say, it's normal to feel this way when you're seeing someone that you don't see very often. It's normal to feel this way when you're going away for a weekend and you can't go home because it's too far away, you know, even when I go to the airport to go on holiday, I have a panic about if I've packed the right things. This is normal, so I can be kind to myself. And that might help me reduce some of the feelings, to make the feelings less painful. So then at changing my behaviour, what could I do instead? Oh, got a barking dog. So for me, acting as if is really helpful. If I act as if I'm confident, if I act as if I'm friendly, then it might start to come true. I don't know about how many of you have gone out and you've gone, oh, I don't want to do this. And then when you go and do it, actually it's all right, you quite enjoyed it. So I'll put act as if. I might make sure that I do take breaks to relax, to switch my brain off, like to play on my phone, but to have very limited breaks. So I'm not sitting playing on my phone in front of everybody. I might excuse myself and go, I'm going to go put the kettle on. Does anybody want a cup of tea? And then I can sneak off to the kitchen on my own for 10 minutes, just play on my phone and have a relax. So take breaks. And rather than moan to my husband, what could I do instead? I guess I could say out loud and acknowledge, I'm feeling really anxious about this, but then do something else, do my breathing. So again, it's distraction. So say my feelings, never squash your feelings. There's nothing wrong with how you feel, but it's just about making sure that we're handling them in the most helpful way we can. And then distract. We might want to use our worry tree, our worry time, any resources that we have that help us to relax. So for me, I often bring my knitting along when I see my family, because they might all be chatting away about football or childhood memories or things I can't understand and get along with. So rather than sit and play on my phone and look rude, I can concentrate on my knitting, but it's still quite social. I can look around and smile and yeah, I'm joining in, I'm just doing knitting, but I'm here. So for me, bringing my knitting is a really good resource. Maybe for me, before I go, it might be useful to do things that help me to calm down. So maybe I might write a packing list to make sure I've packed everything and I can check it off and I can reassure myself. You know, for you and your cycles, it might be that I won't avoid something, I'll go and give it a go. Maybe, you know, particular anxiety and depression, we do a lot of avoidance because we're trying to look after ourselves, but actually that avoidance can make things worse. We might have more self-soothing in there, things like I'm going to have a bath, I'm going to have a nice hot shower, I'm going to go and buy some magazines. Whatever for you is soothing, you might pop that in there. It's just changing up what behaviour you're doing. And again, this really beautifully links to your wellbeing plan that you'd have done from last month if you followed our video then. And again, I'll link to that video so you can have a look because it really helps with this. So finally, for my ease, I'm going to draw bubbles around thoughts, feelings and behaviour, just so I know where they are. And I might print this off, I might type it up nicely, but that's our formulation. This is a really quick, basic understanding for how you're feeling and what's going on for you. There are more complex types of formulation. We use lots of different formulations in psychology, and so if you were to go and see a therapist, you might get one specifically for the diagnosis that you have. You might get one that's different because you're doing a different type of therapy. This is cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. Whereas you might have one which is an acceptance and commitment therapy, or a CAT map, which is a really different type of formulation. So there's loads of different types, and if you see a therapist and you don't do this, that's okay. That's them using their professional judgment. But for us here today, this is a really, really good starting block to start to understand who we are, what's going on for us, and that we aren't broken. We've not got loads and loads of different diagnoses. We are individuals, and mental health is individual. And whatever is in your cycle, that's what you're feeling. You don't need to put a label on it. We just need to find ways to break that cycle, and sometimes having a label doesn't give us that answer, whereas this can do. So it's an interesting way of thinking about things. It can be difficult to get your head around at first, so do ask questions. I'm always here to answer any, to point you towards things that you can read if you wanted to do a little bit more. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Take care. Bye bye.